Lena had heard stories of the old house at the end of the street. It had been empty for years, its windows dark and uninviting. But one chilly evening, she found herself standing in front of the house, her curiosity getting the better of her. The door creaked open with a soft push, and the scent of dust filled the air. It was as if the house had been waiting for her to step inside. Her heart raced as she took a step, unsure of what she might find. The whispers began faintly, like a soft breeze brushing against her ear. She paused, listening closely, but there was no one there. As Lena walked deeper into the house, the whispers grew louder, though she couldn't understand them. The walls seemed to breathe, shifting with the sounds. She felt an eerie chill down her spine, but something kept pulling her forward. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet, and the air felt thick with mystery. She reached the staircase, its steps covered in layers of dust. The whispers now sounded like they were coming from upstairs. Her curiosity was stronger than the fear building inside her. Lena knew she had to follow the sound, even if it led her to something she couldn't explain. Lena reached the top of the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers had stopped, leaving an unsettling silence in their place. As she stepped onto the second floor, she noticed the door at the end of the hallway. It was slightly ajar, as if inviting her in. She could barely see inside, but a shadow moved behind the door. It was not a person, but something darker, something more sinister. She swallowed hard, but the pull of the house was too strong. Lena took a slow, cautious step toward the door, her mind racing with questions. The closer she got, the stronger the feeling of dread became. The air felt colder, and the silence was suffocating. She reached for the doorknob, her hand trembling. The moment her fingers touched the cool metal, the whispers returned, louder this time, but still incomprehensible. They seemed to swirl around her, filling her ears. With a deep breath, Lena turned the knob and slowly pushed the door open. What lay inside was more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. The room was dimly lit by the pale light of the moon shining through the cracked windows. Dust hung in the air like fog, and old furniture was scattered around, covered in sheets. But what caught Lena's attention was the large mirror on the far wall. The reflection in it was not of the room, but of a long-forgotten scene. She saw a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, standing in the middle of the room. The woman's face was blurred, but her eyes were full of sorrow. Lena stepped closer, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Suddenly, the whispers returned, this time clearer than before. The woman in the mirror seemed to move, her lips forming words that Lena could almost hear. "Help me," the figure whispered, though her voice was not real. It felt as though the woman's soul was trapped in the mirror, unable to escape. Lena felt a wave of pity and fear wash over her. She knew that she had to find out what had happened to this woman. But as she reached out toward the mirror, a cold hand gripped her wrist, pulling her back. Lena stumbled backward, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The hand that had pulled her was invisible, yet it felt real. She looked around the room, trying to find any sign of what had just happened. The air grew heavier, and the temperature dropped even more. The mirror seemed to shimmer, like something was trying to break through. As she backed away, she tripped over an old chair and fell to the floor. Her hands brushed against a loose floorboard, which creaked when she moved it. Beneath it, a small, dusty box lay hidden. Curiosity overpowered her fear as she picked it up. Inside the box was an old journal, its pages yellow with age. As she opened it, she discovered it belonged to the woman in the mirror. The pages were filled with stories of love, betrayal, and loss. The woman had once lived in this house with her family, but something terrible had happened. She had been murdered, and her soul had been trapped, never able to find peace. Lena's heart ached as she read the words. She realized that the whispers she had been hearing were not just from the house, but from the woman's spirit, trying to tell her story. Lena knew she had to help her. With newfound resolve, Lena began to search the house for any clues that might explain how to free the trapped soul. She revisited every room, looking for anything out of place. In the basement, she discovered a hidden door that led to a small, forgotten chapel. The air inside was thick with the scent of decay. The altar in the center of the room held a single candle, still burning after all these years. As Lena approached, she felt the presence of the woman's spirit surrounding her. The whispers grew softer, almost as if they were waiting for something. Lena knelt at the altar and whispered a prayer for the woman's soul. As she did, the whispers stopped completely. For a moment, everything was still. Then, a soft light appeared before her, and the woman's figure materialized, smiling in gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now peaceful. Lena watched as the woman slowly faded away, her soul finally free. The house, once dark and filled with whispers, was now silent. Lena stood up, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She knew she had just helped release a lost soul, and in doing so, had uncovered the truth of the old house's haunting. The house was no longer silent. After the woman's spirit was freed, Lena thought the haunting would end, but it only deepened. Shadows began to move of their own accord, creeping along the walls and floors. The temperature dropped once more, and the whispers returned, but now they were more urgent. The house seemed to be alive with something dark, something far more dangerous than the ghost of the woman. Lena knew she had to uncover the cause of this new disturbance before it was too late. She returned to the room with the mirror, her heart racing as she noticed something was different. The mirror was no longer reflecting the room. Instead, it showed a scene from long ago, when the house was alive with laughter and joy. Lena saw a family gathered around a fireplace, but the atmosphere quickly changed. The image shifted to a violent struggle, and a man could be seen attacking someone. It was the same man who had once lived in the house, the woman's husband. His eyes were wild, and his face twisted with rage. The whispers grew louder, as if trying to warn Lena of something terrible. The truth was buried in this room, and Lena had to dig deeper to find it. Lena couldn't understand what she was seeing, but she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. As she stared at the mirror, she realized that the shadows moving around the house weren't just figments of her imagination, they were memories of the past. The house itself seemed to be haunted by the curses of those who had once lived here. Lena decided to search the house once more, this time with the intent to uncover the dark secret that bound the house in eternal torment. She found a hidden staircase leading to the attic, a place she had avoided before. The air up there was thick, and the floor creaked under her every step. In the attic, she discovered a dusty chest, covered in cobwebs. As she opened it, her hands trembled. Inside, she found a collection of strange objects, old books, dark stones, and an ancient-looking box. On the lid of the box was an inscription in a language Lena couldn't understand. But as she touched it, the whispers intensified, and a chill ran down her spine. The house had been cursed, and the curse was tied to this box. Lena realized that the key to ending the terror of the house was hidden within these ancient items. But would she be able to break the curse in time? Lena's determination grew stronger as she pieced together the truth. The man in the mirror, the woman's husband, had been a powerful sorcerer who had placed a curse on the house after he murdered his wife. His dark magic had trapped the souls of everyone who had lived there, and the house had become a prison for their tortured spirits. Lena could feel the presence of the man's evil power, still lingering in the shadows, threatening to consume her as well. The whispers weren't just voices, they were the cries of those trapped by the sorcerer's curse, desperate to be freed. With the cursed box in her hands, Lena knew she had to act quickly. She had found a spell in one of the old books that might break the curse, but it required an offering the blood of the one who had placed the curse. As the shadows seemed to grow stronger, Lena realized that the only way to destroy the evil force was to confront it head-on. She stood alone in the attic, the box in her hands, ready to face whatever was waiting for her. Lena descended the attic stairs, the cursed box clutched tightly in her hands. The house groaned and shuddered as if it were alive, reacting to the magic she carried. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows began to swirl around her, moving like a dark storm. She made her way to the main room, where the fireplace once stood, knowing that this was where the final confrontation would take place. The floor beneath her feet cracked, and the temperature dropped even further. She felt the sorcerer's presence, a cold, malevolent force that filled the room with a sense of impending doom. The man appeared before her, his face twisted with rage and dark magic swirling around him. "You dare to challenge me," he hissed, his voice like the scraping of nails on a chalkboard. Lena didn't flinch. She opened the cursed box, revealing the dark stones and the ancient book. With steady hands, she began to recite the spell, her voice unwavering. The man screamed in fury as the shadows around him began to unravel. But just as Lena was about to finish the incantation, the sorcerer lunged at her, trying to stop her. In a final desperate move, Lena used the last of her strength and completed the spell, sending a burst of light through the room. The moment the spell was complete, the sorcerer's dark power shattered. The room was flooded with light, and the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The shadows that had tormented Lena for so long disappeared, and the air grew warm again. The whispers faded into nothingness, leaving behind a peaceful silence. Lena stood in the center of the room, exhausted but triumphant. The curse had been broken, and the spirits of the house were finally free. As the house began to settle, Lena felt a sense of closure. The woman's spirit had been freed, and the sorcerer's evil had been vanquished. The house, once filled with darkness and fear, was now peaceful and still. Lena left the house, knowing that she had done what no one else could. The phantom whispers had stopped, and the house would never haunt anyone again. Although the house had been freed from its curse, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the corners of her mind. As she walked through the now silent rooms, she noticed an old worn journal on the mantelpiece, its pages yellowed with age. It didn't seem to belong to anyone in the house, yet it felt strangely familiar. She picked it up and began to read, the words on the pages revealing a story far darker than she had imagined. It was a journal kept by the woman's daughter, who had been a child when the tragedy struck. The journal spoke of strange events that had occurred in the house even before the murder, of unexplained whispers and shadowy figures that seemed to follow the family. The daughter had written about a hidden room in the house, a place no one had ever dared to enter. The journal hinted that this room held the final secret to the house's cursed history. Lena knew she had to find this hidden room, as it might hold the answers to why the haunting had begun in the first place. Lena began her search for the hidden room, following the clues written in the daughter's journal. She checked every corner, every wall, until at last she found a section of the wall that seemed to shift under her touch. With a soft click, a door opened, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside, there was nothing but an old chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. When Lena opened it, she gasped. Inside the chest was a mirror, identical to the one from the upstairs room. As she gazed into the mirror, a flash of light filled the room, and Lena saw a vision of the house's past. She saw the family, their lives filled with love and laughter, before the tragedy struck. But there was something more, an ancient ritual performed by the sorcerer that had started the curse in the first place. The mirror had been the key to trapping the spirits, and now it was the key to their freedom. Lena took the mirror and placed it on the altar in the hidden room. As she did, the house began to tremble. The spirits of the family, finally at peace, appeared one last time. They smiled at Lena, their eyes full of gratitude. The whispers, now gentle and soft, echoed through the house. But this time, they were filled with love and appreciation. The house was no longer a prison, but a place of peace and remembrance. Lena walked away from the house one final time, knowing that the story of the phantom whispers had come to a close. The house would no longer haunt anyone, and the spirits had finally been set free. As she left the grounds, the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the old house, which now stood in quiet peace, its secrets finally laid to rest. Lena left the house behind, the weight of its history now a distant memory. For a while, she thought she might never return to the town where the old house stood. But as time passed, the whispers of the house seemed to call to her, pulling her back. Lena knew that the peace she had restored in the house was fragile, and she could not leave it forever. Something still lingered in the town, an unresolved mystery, a truth waiting to be uncovered. She returned to the town, hoping to find answers. The townspeople spoke of the old house with a mixture of fear and respect, but no one knew the full story. They told her that over the years, there had been strange occurrences in the area, disappearances, odd sightings, and unexplained phenomena. It seemed as though the house's past had seeped into the land itself. Lena, determined to find the source of the lingering unrest, decided to delve deeper into the town's forgotten history. The more she learned, the clearer it became that the house's story was far from over. The town's history was filled with secrets, many of which had been deliberately buried over the years. Lena visited the local library and began sifting through old records and newspaper articles. One particular article caught her attention, a report from many years ago about a group of people who had mysteriously disappeared near the house. The report mentioned the town's founders, who were said to have practiced ancient rituals, some of which involved dark magic. Lena dug deeper into the records, discovering that the sorcerer who had cursed the house was not the first to use dark magic in the town. The founders had used the land for their rituals, seeking power and immortality. It was no wonder that the house had become a center for such malevolent energy. The town itself seemed to be cursed, its very foundation built on dark forces. Lena realized that the true source of the haunting wasn't just the house, it was the land itself, tainted by centuries of evil practices. The more Lena uncovered, the more she realized that the curse was far older than she had originally thought. The house had been built on land that had been used for dark rituals long before the sorcerer ever set foot there. The land had been chosen for its mystical properties, and the founders had performed ancient rituals to gain power and control over the spirits. But their greed had come at a cost. The rituals had angered the spirits of the land, trapping them in an endless cycle of torment. Lena knew that in order to end the curse once and for all, she would need to find a way to undo the ancient rituals. She visited the town's old cemetery, where many of the founding families were buried. There, she discovered a hidden grave, one that had been deliberately concealed from the public. The name on the gravestone was familiar to the sorcerers, but beneath the name was an inscription, a warning: the land shall never be free until the debt is paid. It was clear that the sorcerer had never truly been able to escape the consequences of his actions. The land had bound him, just as it had bound the spirits. Lena knew that to lift the curse, she would need to perform a ritual of her own. It would require a sacrifice of binding of sorts to finally undo the dark magic that had plagued the land for centuries. But Lena was hesitant. She had already sacrificed so much to free the spirits in the house. What more was required of her? She sought the guidance of an old woman who lived on the outskirts of town, a woman rumored to know the ways of the ancient magic. The woman spoke in cryptic words, explaining that the land's curse could only be broken through a selfless act, a willingness to give up something precious in exchange for peace. Lena understood what she had to do. She would have to offer herself to the land, tying her spirit to the land's history and its future, so that the curse would be lifted once and for all. The night of the ritual arrived, and Lena stood in the center of the town, beneath the ancient oak tree that had witnessed so many of the town's dark deeds. She placed the mirror from the house before her, its surface reflecting the dark sky. With a deep breath, she began the incantation, her voice steady and calm, despite the fear that gripped her heart. The air around her seemed to thicken, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. As Lena spoke the final words of the ritual, the earth beneath her cracked open, and a surge of energy shot upward. The spirits of the land, trapped for so long, began to stir. They whispered to her, not in fear, but in gratitude. Lena felt the weight of their presence, their sadness, and their longing for peace. The power of the land, the power of the ancient rituals, was now in her hands. With one final gesture, Lena offered herself to the land, binding her spirit to it, ensuring that the curse would be lifted. The earth grew still, the air lighter, and the sky began to brighten with the first light of dawn. The curse had been broken. The land, once plagued by dark magic and evil rituals, was now free. The spirits who had been trapped for so long were at peace, their whispers no longer filled with sorrow but with gratitude and joy. Lena's body was exhausted, but her heart was at rest. The sacrifice she had made had ensured the peace of the land and the town for generations to come. As she stood in the center of the town, she felt the presence of the spirits surrounding her, no longer haunting, but protecting. The town's dark history had come to an end, and a new era of peace and prosperity began. Lena left the town that day, knowing that she had done what no one else could. The phantom whispers of the old house were no more, and the town would never again be plagued by the shadows of its past. The land was free, and with it, the people. Years passed, and the town began to change. The land, once shrouded in darkness, had become fertile and prosperous. The whispers that once filled the air were replaced by laughter and joy. The people, who had lived in fear for so long, now walked freely, unburdened by the shadows of the past. The old house, no longer haunted, had become a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even the darkest places could be healed. Lena, having left the town after her sacrifice, returned only once more. She found that the once decaying house had been restored and was now a beautiful, welcoming place. The people of the town had turned it into a museum of sorts, honoring the history and the lessons learned from the dark times. It was a place where children played and families gathered, and where the past was remembered not with fear, but with reverence. Lena's return to the town was brief, but it was enough to see the fruits of her sacrifice. The land had thrived, and the people were happier than ever. She visited the cemetery, where she had once uncovered the truth about the town's dark past, and found the graves of the town's founders now peaceful and untouched by the curse they had once imposed. The town's elders had kept a tradition alive, telling the story of Lena's bravery and the sacrifices she made to save them. They spoke of her not as a hero, but as a symbol of the power of selflessness. It was a story passed down to the younger generations, ensuring that the lessons of the past would never be forgotten. Lena left the town one last time, knowing that her work was done. She had broken the curse, and in doing so had changed the fate of not just the house, but the entire town. Her legacy would live on forever. Though Lena had left the town, the mirror she had used to break the curse remained in the house. The mirror, once a symbol of the darkness that had plagued the land, had now become a symbol of hope. It was displayed in the center of the house, where visitors came to see its beauty and history. However, as time passed, the mirror began to change. At night, when the moonlight hid its surface, faint whispers could be heard emanating from it. These were not the same whispers that had once been filled with fear and anger. Instead, they were soft, gentle voices speaking of love, peace, and the lives that had been saved. The mirror had absorbed the essence of the ritual and was now a conduit for the spirits of the land, forever remembering Lena's selflessness and the peace she had brought to the town. But as the years went on, strange occurrences began to stir once again. The townspeople, though living in peace, started to experience unsettling dreams. Some spoke of shadowy figures appearing in the corners of their vision, while others reported hearing faint whispers in the wind. The mirror, which had once been a symbol of peace, now seemed to be emanating an energy that the town couldn't explain. Lena, now living in a distant city, received a letter one evening. It was from the town's elders, asking her to return. They had sensed a change in the air, something dark and ancient stirring once again. Lena's heart sank as she read the letter. She had known, deep down, that the curse had never truly been lifted. It had only been dormant, waiting for the right moment to return. She packed her bags and made her way back to the town, knowing that the battle was far from over. When Lena arrived back in the town, she immediately felt the shift in the atmosphere. The air was thick with unease, and the once vibrant town now seemed to carry a weight of sorrow. She made her way to the house, where the mirror stood, untouched but radiating a strange energy. The whispers that once spoke of peace were now tinged with a darker tone. Lena entered the house, where the people had gathered. The elders, their faces grave, spoke of the strange occurrences that had been happening. The children were having nightmares, and the crops were beginning to wither. The town was once again suffering, and the spirits seemed restless. Lena realized that the curse hadn't been broken, just delayed. The land had been sealed temporarily, But the forces that had been awakened by the sorcerer's rituals were far from gone. They had been waiting for the right moment to return, and now, it seemed, that moment had arrived. Lena knew what had to be done. She had to perform the ritual once more, but this time it would require more than just a sacrifice. The spirits of the past had to be confronted directly. Their power would have to be matched. The land needed to be purified once and for all. Lena stood before the mirror, which now seemed to pulse with dark energy. She began the incantation, the same one she had used before, but with a twist this time. She would call on the spirits of the land to aid her. The air around her grew heavy, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. The spirits, both kind and vengeful, gathered around her, their voices calling out in a cacophony of whispers. Lena closed her eyes and concentrated, calling on the forces of light to counterbalance the darkness. A blinding flash of light filled the room, and the whispers grew louder, then suddenly fell silent. When Lena opened her eyes, she found herself standing in a different place, an open field, bathed in soft sunlight. The land was peaceful, free from the curse that had plagued it for so long. The mirror, now shattered into 1,000 pieces, lay at her feet, no longer a conduit for dark energy. The town had been freed from the grip of the past, and the spirits, now at peace, faded into the light. Lena had done it. She had finally broken the curse that had bound the land and its people for centuries. As Lena walked away from the old house, she knew that her journey had come to an end. The phantom whispers were no more, and the town was finally free. The legacy of her sacrifice would live on, not in the whispers of the past, but in the peaceful lives of those who would never have to fear the darkness again. Despite the peace that had settled over the town, Lena felt an unease deep within her heart. As she walked through the now thriving town, she sensed something still lingered. The shadows that had once filled the house seemed to have dissipated, but the memories of the past were far from gone. The people had learned to live in harmony, but the land still carried the weight of centuries of dark magic. Lena knew that although the curse was broken, the sorcerer's legacy was not so easily erased. The rituals he had performed, the power he had sought, had left an indelible mark on the land. Lena feared that the peace they now enjoyed was only temporary. She had to find a way to truly destroy the remnants of the sorcerer's influence once and for all. One night, as Lena was walking through the woods near the house, she stumbled upon a hidden path that she had never noticed before. It led her to a secluded area deep within the forest, where the trees seemed to part, revealing an ancient stone structure half buried in the earth. Curious and cautious, Lena ventured closer. As she touched the stones, she felt a cold energy rush through her fingertips. This was no ordinary place. It was a hidden chamber, one that had been sealed off for centuries. Lena entered the chamber, and as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw something that made her blood run cold. An altar, old and covered in moss, with symbols that matched those she had seen in the sorcerer's ancient texts. This was the source, the very heart of the dark magic that had cursed the town. Lena knew that she had to destroy it before the sorcerer's power could return. Lena had faced many challenges during her journey, but this would be her greatest test. The altar, with its dark symbols, pulsed with an unnatural energy. Lena could feel the weight of the sorcerer's influence pressing down on her. As Lena prepared herself, she knew that this would be no simple task. The ritual required great strength, both physical and mental. It demanded a deep understanding of the magic that had once bound the land. Lena could already feel the ancient energy swirling around her, trying to prevent her from completing the ritual. With a deep breath, Lena began the incantation, calling upon the elements of fire, earth, water, and air to aid her. The energy in the chamber began to shift, the air crackling with power as the ritual took hold. For a moment, the room was filled with light, and the symbols on the altar began to burn away. But just as Lena thought she had succeeded, the ground beneath her shook, and the chamber seemed to fight back. The chamber trembled violently, and the whispers of the past grew louder. Lena could hear the sorcerer's voice echoing in the wind, his spirit fighting against the ritual. It was clear that he was not ready to let go of his power. The magic that had once bound the town was still alive, still fighting to retain control. Lena stood firm, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that if she hesitated now, the darkness would consume her. With every ounce of strength, she pushed forward, continuing the incantation. The whispers turned into screams, the air thick with the struggle between light and dark. Then, with one final, powerful cry, the altar exploded in a burst of light. The chamber collapsed, and the sorcerer's spirit was torn from the land, vanishing into the ether. For the first time in years, Lena felt the world around her calm. The air grew still, and the weight of the sorcerer's power was finally lifted from the land. The chamber, once a place of dark magic, was now a pile of rubble, the altar destroyed beyond recognition. Lena stood amidst the ruins, her body exhausted but her spirit at peace. The fight was over. The sorcerer's hold on the land had been broken. The town and its people could finally live without fear of the past. She took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The sun was rising, casting a warm light over the forest. The battle was won, and the land was free. Lena returned to the town, and as she walked through the streets, she could feel the difference in the air. The town that had once been heavy with fear and shadows was now bathed in light. The people, though unaware of the battle she had just fought, felt the change. The crops were thriving, the children played in the streets, and the town seemed to hum with life. Lena knew that this peace was not something that could be taken for granted. The darkness would always try to return, but now the town had the strength to resist it. And Lena, having made the ultimate sacrifice, would always be remembered as the one who had freed them from the grip of the past. As years passed, Lena's story became a legend in the town. The old house, once the center of fear and darkness, was now a place of history, visited by those who wanted to learn about the past and the power of redemption. The town thrived, and the people lived in harmony with the land, knowing that they owed their peace to the courage and selflessness of one woman. Lena's legacy was not just in the stories told about her, but in the lives of the people she had saved. They named their children after her, planted trees in her honor, and passed down her story to each new generation. The whispers of the past, though never forgotten, were now ones of gratitude and respect. On a quiet evening, years after the final battle, Lena stood at the edge of the forest once more, looking out at the town she had saved. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the land. She had done all she could, and now it was time for her to let go. Lena walked away from the town, her heart full of peace. She knew that her work was done, that the town would continue to thrive and live in harmony. The whispers of the old house had faded into memory, and the darkness that had once plagued the land was no more. As Lena disappeared into the horizon, the town stood silent for a moment. as if paying its final respects. The peace she had brought would last forever, and her spirit would remain with the land, forever guarding it from the shadows of the past. Years had passed since Lena's final departure, and the town had flourished. The once haunted land was now a vibrant, peaceful place where people from nearby regions came to start anew. The house that had once been the center of darkness was now an icon of resilience, its walls speaking of the strength and sacrifices made long ago. The town had grown, and with it, new faces and fresh hopes. Many of the older residents told stories of the days when the whispers filled the air, reminding the younger generations of the town's dark past and the bravery that saved them all. But there was a sense of unease among the people's small things, whispers of things that couldn't quite be explained. Late at night, the wind would rustle through the trees, and the distant howls seemed more ominous than they ever had been before. Though life seemed peaceful on the surface, something lingered beneath the calm. It started subtly. A few villagers reported seeing shadows flitting at the edges of their vision, always fleeting, always just out of reach. Strange noises could be heard echoing through the woods, sounds that seemed to come from no particular source. The air felt heavier, as if something was watching. At first, no one wanted to believe it. The town had known peace for so long, and it was easier to dismiss the strange occurrences as figments of an overactive imagination. But then, one evening, a group of children playing near the old house saw something they couldn't explain: a figure, dark and shifting, standing in the window. It was a fleeting image, but the fear it stirred was enough to send the children running back to their parents. The whispers had returned, but this time they were not soft and gentle like before. The voice that called out in the wind was darker, laden with malice. It was as though the house itself was calling them back to its shadows. Lena's legacy, though strong, was not enough to prevent the town from facing a new challenge. The people who had lived in peace for so long were now forced to confront a new evil, one they did not fully understand. It was not the sorcerer's curse that haunted them, but something different, something ancient. The elders, who had long since passed down the stories of Lena's bravery, now gathered to discuss the return of the dark presence. They spoke of legends that had been whispered among the older generations, stories of a force older than the sorcerer, a malevolent entity that had once been sealed away long before Lena's time. It was said that the sorcerer's magic had only been a tool, an instrument used to open the gateway to something far more terrifying. And now, the time had come for that gate to be reopened. As the whispers grew louder and more persistent, the town's leaders turned to the ancient texts that had been kept hidden for centuries. These texts, written by those who had lived before, spoke of a prophecy, a warning about the return of a darkness that had been sealed away by powerful forces. The prophecy described a being of shadow and night, one that could not be defeated by mere magic or force. The entity was said to feed on fear and despair, growing stronger with every emotion it consumed. The prophecy also spoke of a lone figure, a hero who would once again rise to fight the darkness, but this hero would not be the same as Lena. This new hero would need to tap into a deeper power, a power that transcended the mortal realm. The people of the town now understood that they were not facing the same evil from before, but a far older and more dangerous force. It was an enemy they had no experience fighting, and fear began to spread once again among the villagers. As the darkness continued to spread, the town's leaders searched desperately for the hero of the prophecy. They knew that this individual would be their last hope, but the question was, who could it be? The prophecy had been vague. offering no clues as to the identity of the one who could save them. Rumors spread that the hero might be someone connected to the house, someone with a bloodline tied to the land's ancient magic. But who could that be? The town had changed so much over the years, and no one knew who might be capable of tapping into such deep and powerful magic. The elders, now more urgent than ever, called upon every resident of the town to aid in the search. They searched the archives for any clues, talked to old families, and even consulted with those who had once practiced magic. But still, they came up empty. One evening, as Lena's daughter, Alara, now a young woman, walked through the fields near the old house, she felt a strange pull, a connection she couldn't explain. She had grown up hearing the stories of her mother's bravery, but she had never truly understood the depth of the magic that ran through her veins. As Alara stood before the house, the wind picked up, and for the first time, she heard the whispers. They were soft at first, just like the ones her mother had once heard, but they grew louder, almost as though they were calling her name. And confused and frightened, Alara entered the house, drawn by an unseen force. The air inside was thick, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. The mirror, which had been shattered so long ago, lay in pieces on the floor, but as Alara stepped closer, the pieces began to glow faintly. She realized then that she was the one the prophecy spoke of, the one who had the bloodline of the original hero, the one who could tap into the ancient power of the land. Her connection to Lena was deeper than she had ever known, and the whispers were not just calling her to the house, they were calling her to her destiny. Alara stood before the shattered mirror, feeling the weight of her mother's legacy on her shoulders. The whispers were growing louder, more urgent, as if urging her to take action. She had always known that her mother had done something incredible, but she had never understood the true depth of the magic that flowed through her veins. With a deep breath, Alara closed her eyes and reached out, allowing the power of the land to fill her. The energy surged through her body, warm and comforting, yet intense. She knew, in that moment, that she was not just Lena's daughter, she was the new protector of the town, the one who would face the ancient darkness that had returned. The whispers faded, leaving only silence behind. Alara opened her eyes, and the house seemed to come alive around her. The power that had once been dormant in the land had been awakened once again, but this time it was in her hands. The darkness that had threatened to consume the town was now facing its greatest challenge yet. With her destiny clear, Alara walked out of the house, ready to face the ancient evil that had returned to the land, knowing that she was not alone, that her mother's spirit and the strength of the land itself would guide her. This concludes the chapters from chapter 34 to chapter 40 of The Phantom Whispers of the Old House, with Alara stepping into the role of the new hero, ready to confront the darkness that threatens the town. As Alara stepped into the unknown, the winds of destiny howled around her. The whispers of the old house had led her to this moment, and now the power of her ancestors surged through her veins. With the weight of her mother's legacy behind her, she was no longer just a daughter, but a protector, a beacon of hope in the face of darkness. The battle ahead would be long and treacherous, but Alara knew one thing for certain: the shadows could never truly claim the land as their own, not as long as there were those brave enough to stand against them. And so, as the town watched from afar, its fate intertwined with Alara's, the story of the Phantom Whispers continued, forever echoing through the halls of the old house, a reminder that the light will always find a way, no matter how deep the darkness may seem.